Now, there's still no word on a cure for the virus.
Report suspicious activity and call 911.
Welcome back to Season 2 of your favorite podcast, That Would Be Rad, a podcast that majors in 80s and 90s nostalgia, comic culture, all things paranormal, and minors in retro video games, tabletop RPGs, pre-internet mysteries, and raising our kids to be half as cool as we were back in the 80s. I'm your host, Tyler Bentz, and this is your other host,
Woody Brown.
Dude, we made it.
Oh, man. Incredible, dude. This is just I'm so excited for just this whole season, but today's episode, I mean, listeners, first off, thank you for coming back. Welcome. We feel rested. We feel stronger.
Yeah.
And we're ready to just rock out season 2. And we couldn't think of a better way to kick off our second season of That Would Be Rad than to have our special guest that's with us today. This is a man of many talents. He's an actor, a producer, a podcaster, and even a game creator. You know him from TV hits like Pretty Little Liars, Popular, Magnum P.I., and Expedition Bigfoot. Or perhaps you caught him in theaters in movies like Darkness Rising or our favorite, Willow Creek. You can also catch him weekly on one of our favorite podcasts, Bigfoot Collectors Club. Our friend, and now yours, the one, the only, Mr. Bryce Johnson.
Hey, what's up, fellas?
Hey, man, how's it going?
How are you?
It's going so good. First, just let me say what an honor and a privilege to be on your podcast, man. I love what you guys do.
Man.
So thanks for having me here.
Oh, thank you
Dude,
so much.
thank you so much, man. It's like, one of the reasons why we called our podcast That Would Be Rad is because Tyler and I would just kind of sit around ever since we've known each other and just kind of be like, man, wouldn't it be cool or wouldn't it be rad if, yada, 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 right? If we got to meet Bigfoot in real life or if we saw a flying, whatever it is.
Yes.
But before we started this podcast, no lie, we were just kind of sitting around and Tyler being an avid fan of Bigfoot Collectors Club and introducing me to it.
Oh, yeah.
We were like, man, how rad would it be if, down the line at some point in a couple years, we could get somebody from Bigfoot Collectors Club, one of those awesome dudes to come on our show. And now here we are. So, man, it's you put it out there in the universe, man, and bam, that's right. To say thank you for taking the time is just not even enough, man. It just means the world to us.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really happy to be here. And you know what? Before the end of your second season, we'll make sure you get Michael and Riley on there as well.
Dude, that would be so sick, man.
Oh, that's a trifecta. Yeah, nice. Absolutely. Yeah, I was probably on my third sort of binge listening to every episode all the way through, and I kept bugging Woody man, you gotta listen to this podcast. You gotta listen to this podcast. And I've been listening to podcasts for years, but actually, I think I even said this on the last episode, but it was like there's something about you guys that it's like, the real sort of loosey-goosey, friend dynamic, but there's also this, really nice sort of, format that I was just like, man, this is doable. This feels like something that, we would sort of, be a part of. So, your show, really, really inspired us. And, the first few episodes, we both just rave about it, of our podcast.
Yeah,
so.
It's basically, the first, 10 episodes is essentially a commercial for Bigfoot Collectors Club.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much. I mean, when I met Michael and we can get into a little bit more of that, but we really just wanted to create sort of a friends talking about the strange. And, I've listened to quite a few podcasts on the paranormal too. And a lot of them have a sort of a very serious overture. And we thought, some of this stuff is so strange and so weird, man. Let's just, have fun with it. And, it's kind of a great way to open people up to the strange, the world of the strange. And so yeah, we don't take ourselves too seriously, but we definitely take the the topic of high strangeness seriously. And so that's sort of where it all fit together.
Yeah. And I think it's so cool too, because, on one hand, you could be talking about something really just kind of, I would say just to the normal sort of layperson, potentially kind of just out there, right? And then you hit him with Uncle Dickie, and then it's, then it's like,
trying to sell some ball shavers too
peace,
while we're at it. So hey,
hey man, yeah, it's the best. Oh man, and like, there's so many different things that we want to kind of ask you guys, having you on the show and stuff like that. But I think a good place to start for us today is, kind of focusing in on what I would consider one of the most significant pieces of, like an artifact in Bigfoot history, and that's the Patterson-Gimlin footage.
Sure.
But before we dive into that, one thing that I'm super interested in is, like, what sparked your interest in Bigfoot and high strangeness? Because when I think back in my own memory, it's like, when did I first see Bigfoot, right? And it was a picture, I think, from the still, or a still photo from the footage of the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Yeah.
That's like what sticks out in my mind.
That sounds about
Those
right.
pendulous breasts.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, and I talk about it on the podcast, but I had a real strange experience when I was about 5 years old. Just to do like a brief version of it, I go into the longer details on our podcast. But I saw something in my window late in the early morning hours, and it was sort of this. It was just the head, right? And so I'm in a bunk bed. My brother's on the top bunk, I'm on the bottom, and I remember it must have been like in the middle of the night, and I found my eyes just sort of popping open, and in the window, this sort of red glowing devil-like character walks profile, stops right in the middle of the window, and then just turns its head towards me with these sort of yellow, piercing, glowing eyes, and just like peered right through my soul, turned away, and then walked off. Obviously, I didn't get back to sleep or whatever, but I that was the spark for me. And God, you talk to a lot of these people who get hooked on this stuff, and there's always something that happened in their life that sparked an interest like that. But after that, it was, in grade school and middle school, if there was the school library or the bookmobile, which was always more rad. And I would always, check out anything on books on. It started with ghosts, right? I would love books with ghosts, and then from there you're moving into cryptids, Loch Ness monster, and then of course you're going to stumble upon a Bigfoot book, and that's really where it all started. And I do remember seeing the Patterson-Gimlin footage played on In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy.
In our modern world of concrete and steel, we're far removed from the Indian lore of Bigfoot. It's hard to imagine any corner of our crowded world where a giant man-like creature could roam free. Yet there's persuasive evidence that Bigfoot is real.
And I became immediately fixated on all those old shows that just explored mysteries. I loved that stuff.
Yeah, I think for our generation and yours, that show was like a real sort of gateway, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, gateway is such a great word, isn't it? Because, I mean, really, it's like these topics, they just pull you in, and then they get a hold of you, and they don't let go.
And just when you think you kind of have it figured out, this is what I've found, because I'm kind of new to this game. And throughout this episode, as you know, like, our podcast is pretty broad. We talk about everything from, cryptids and stuff, and things that we think are really interesting, and UFOs and strange phenomenon and all these kind of things. But we also talk about, our favorite 80s movies. I mean, just last week, I watched all 12 of the Friday the 13th movies.
Oh, that's
just
incredible.
So that we could release this week. Yeah, it was quite a task. But
I love that. You guys would be so proud of me. I have this list on my phone, and it's all the movies that really defined me in the 80s. And with my kids, my daughter and my son, it's like on a Friday night, it's like, okay, this is what's next, Coming to America, and it's like, it's just like, and they're like, it's great to watch them sort of, pick up on these movies that really formulated my character. I mean, because there's some okay movies out there today, but man, they just don't have that certain panache that those 80s movies did. And so
I mean, there's like a certain like
that.
spirit about the 80s movies, like even one that we just watched recently, like One Crazy Summer, like
man,
that like anything is possible kind of vibe that all these 80s movies have. Just man, it's really tough to kind of find that in anything today. And I don't know if that's because the current generation is it's harder to convince them of that, but man, I just love that time. But so because our audience is so sort of broad and all over the place in terms of what they're kind of coming to listen to, some of the questions that I am going to ask is kind of for the benefit of those that may not know much about Bigfoot in general, or
of course,
especially like Patterson-Gimlin and stuff like that. But
PGF starter course.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Bigfoot 101.
That's it. Exactly. I've got a couple of different questions about this. Number one, in your opinion, would you say that this is still literally like the sort of best, most significant footage that exists out there?
Well, it certainly seems to be. And, I think a lot of people forget that this was taken in 1967 with a 16 millimeter camera that was rented from a drugstore. And I don't know if you've ever held one of these things, but they're really heavy and they're not easy to shoot with. And, the idea that I think people often forget that, there's really no retakes on a roll of film, what he shot with Roger Patterson on that 16 millimeter and what he turned in, there was no like take one, take two, you know what I mean? It was, it was really just like, 952 frames of this, what appears to be a female Sasquatch walking across the sandbar and glancing back at both him and Bob Gimlin, who were on horseback at the time. And that was it, So what you see is really what you get. And the thing about the Patterson-Gimlin footage is, and we could just, get it out of the way right now, no one's ever going to prove its authenticity and no one's ever going to prove that it's a hoax. So it really is what you make of it. I mean, people have tried both ways from Sunday to validate it or to debunk it, whatever. So it's already past that. It's in the world of mythos now. And what's incredible about that piece of film, and particularly for me, is it sparked. I've talked to a lot of Bigfooters and people who are interested in the subject, and it's that piece of film alone that has really brought so many people into this topic of do these creatures exist, and are they walking around the woods of North America and other places in the world? Do monsters really exist,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what, like, full disclosure, and this is probably going to be funny to you guys, but, I literally didn't even realize or notice or come to the understanding that it was a female until I honestly, I'm sure Tyler told me a million times, but I think I was listening to one of y'all's episodes and I was like, Pendulous, like what? And then rewatching, I'm like, wow, how did I miss those puppies?
Totally. Well, they call the creature, Roger Patterson named it Patty after his wife. So, people henceforth sort of refer to that Sasquatch as Patty. But, there's some great lore that's kind of surrounded by that film. And what I think a lot of people miss is the context that's around that film. In other words, what happened leading up to capturing that film and what happened after the fact. And, so that film was taken in Bluff Creek, like I said, in 1967 on October 20th. And Roger Patterson, he was in the Yakima area where Bob Gimlin lived. And he got a call from one of his sources up there that they were finding tracks all around that area. And not just one set of tracks, but different sized tracks, big tracks and little tracks. So which kind of hints at, was there a family around this area, a family or a group of these creatures sort of walking around this area? And so he immediately, came to Bob Gimlin because he knew in order to really trek that area, he wanted to use horses. He was a rodeo cowboy and really familiar with horses. And And Bob Gimlin, I mean, God, that man, they call him the horse whisperer. He can, he really understands horses. So anyway, he picks up Bob and they head into that area. And they had been combing that sort of Bluff Creek territory for the better part of 2 weeks. And it wasn't until really, they were going to give up. I mean, it was close to their time being done. They had to get out of that area. And then that's as they describe it. And, you can still hear, getting off topic a little bit, Bob Gimlin discuss it. If you, just Google him in YouTube or whatever, and you can hear his very own account, which hasn't changed over 50 years. I mean, the details of it are exactly the same way as he told it back then. But,
And he kind of went into hiding. Well, not hiding, but he didn't really talk about it for years and years also, which I believe lends to his credibility a little.
Yeah, well, like a lot of this stuff, it changed their life, and not exactly for the better, especially on Bob's part. And so they're riding in, and all of a sudden, Roger's horse bucks. And it really wasn't until that horse bucked that he saw it. And what he said he saw was this large, hairy creature about 200 feet away, possibly drinking from this stream. But so he gets off of his horse, and this creature, as soon as it spots the horses, it's interesting. With the horses, they think they might have snuck up on it, because horses move through that type of dense forest really silently. But anyway, as it starts to walk away, he scrambles into his saddlebag to grab that camera, and he's trying to just turn the thing on. And it's so funny because I've been in the woods and I hear a sound, and but anyway, so I've been in the woods, and when I hear something, it takes me a second to even get my iPhone out and like try and focus in on something. It's like it's not easy to capture something that happens in the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we talk about on our show, Tyler and I both have relatively young kids, and it's like, try taking a picture at the beach or something, and like you can't capture it. There's always something going on. That's just trying to get a family picture, much less trying to capture something in action out in the woods.
And while kind of like coming down from like your horse that just bucked, and he's like, wouldn't he was trying to get like around the other side.
Yeah,
of, like,
well, imagine his heart racing on that. And so as he starts to shoot, and you can see it in the beginning frames of that film, it's really shaky. And so he actually goes down to the ground and sets the camera on a log to steady himself. And that's when that film really starts to take on a life, and it gets steady enough just to see this creature taking these, pretty easy strides along this sandbar. And then that famous frame where she looks back. And I always loved, Roger Patterson. He said, if you ever played baseball, when you're irritating the umpire and he gives you that look, that umpire gives you that look of one more time and you're out of here. He said, that's the look they got from that creature. Like, she was pissed. She was not happy that they were there.
Man.
And then she, Bob Gimlin, of course, dismounted his horse, and he grabbed his rifle. He said he never pointed at the thing, but he was just getting Roger's back if he needed it. And
and I think Patterson even yelled out, "Cover me!"
Yeah,
because it was like,
it
was like, whoa, this is like a huge thing, and I'm sure they were both sort of scared too.
You would have to be. I mean, you would have to be. And even me doing Expedition Bigfoot on sometimes when I'm doing a night investigation and I'm going through those woods of a hot zone, really, and it's like I'm backed up right against fear and courage. And I'll tell you one thing: when that camera's on you, you get like courage. You're like, well, I can't back. I got to keep moving forward. I got to get this shot.
I gotta give the people what they want.
You're damn right. And so
it's so funny that you bring that up, man, because I literally one of the things I wanted to ask you about specifically about Expedition Bigfoot was just that, because there's this scene, and I'm pretty sure it's in season 2, that like really struck me as like, holy shit, dude, I would be terrified. There's this part where you're like, you hear something, or no, I think you hear a twig snap, and you're looking at the camera, and you're like, man, how freaky is it when a twig, and then you get interrupted by
I know the exact moment you're talking about, because it just felt like something was moving around ahead of me, and not so much a bear, because I've seen bears and which is pretty rare in and of itself, being out there, just seeing bears. But what happens is this sixth sense comes about you that something's watching you. Something is like, something large and ominous has eyes on you, but I was like that at that moment. I was like, that's when the fear kind of just like stopped moving. You could see it sort of just like,
oh yeah,
I stop
it's
everything.
so natural.
I'm just like, what's happening here?
It was just a really cool moment that they captured, because it's just that pure sort of reaction. It was just really, really cool.
I often ask myself, if there weren't a cameraman behind me, would I be doing that? And it's like, so they lend a lot of courage to I'm like, hey, you got to make a show, but back to Patty. So, and then she just walks away into the tree line, and never stumbles once, just kind of lumbers along easily. But going back to those multiple tracks and why they just got so lucky, perhaps, is some people have speculated, and I always liked this idea. I'm sort of a romantic that there actually was a group of Sasquatches in that area, and her young might have been there around there as well. And,
wouldn't there, not to cut you off, but wasn't there like, I don't know where I heard this, but I feel like it was years and years ago, maybe on a podcast or something, but I seem to remember that there was like somebody was trying to sort of say that like in one or two of the frames, like if you pause it at the right spot or whatever, it almost looked like there was like a smaller one melt down in the background.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so some people have speculated that she's really leading these guys away from her offspring.
Oh, wow.
And that's why she exposed herself in that clearing like that and led them away, which worked too, because they followed her on horseback and they were both, first, by the way, Bob Gimlin is an expert tracker, and Roger Patterson was no slouch himself in that area. So they tracked those tracks into the dense forest line for almost up to 1.5 miles. And for those who thinks it was a hoax or a guy in a gorilla costume, it almost becomes laughable, because just the idea of trying to move in a wooded area with that suit and wooden stompers, because I think a lot of people forget is that the tracks that creature made, Patty, they did go back the next day, well, in the middle of the night really, and plaster cast those. So we do have plaster casts of that trackway made by that creature, and that's compounding evidence for me. Man. So that's what I like to call like a triangulation of evidence. You have more than one witness, you have videographic proof, for lack of a better word, and then you have contextual evidence, which is those plaster casts. And it's not just one. There was 10 casts taken by a gentleman named Bob Titmus, who went back there a week later, and those tracks were still there. So, that's a lot of evidence that just points to something being very real. And I often like to say too, even like if that film never existed, if that film, was never shot, or there was no, Roger Patterson or Bob Gimlin, this Bigfoot phenomenon would still exist. You would still have thousands of sightings reported every decade, almost every year. Still almost every indigenous tribe in North America and even around the world would have a name for a large, hairy, bipedal walking creature. And so this phenomenon would still be alive and well had that film never even existed. But it's just that one piece that just will not go away. Even with today's technology and people carrying around phones and having, great video equipment and stuff, that one piece stands the test of time. And it really stands as a true testament to just, how rare it is, if these creatures exist, to find one out in the open and capture one on video in the daylight, unencumbered by seeing it through trees or anything, and getting a good look at the entire creature, which is exactly what they did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, have you seen anything that kind of comes close for you in terms of video footage? I know the one that comes to mind for me is, where was it? I think Marble Mountain, that video.
Yeah, the Marble Mountain video. Yeah, absolutely. I talked to the guy, well, his son, who it was a youth group, and they were just out in the woods exploring. The Marble Mountain video was taken in Northern California, not too far from that area. I think that's the location. But anyway, so they stumble upon what looks like this nest, this sort of just strange twig structure, and it was really ornate too. I mean, the twigs had been woven together, and it created sort of, this nesting area, covered nesting area, and then one of the boys says, "Hey, there's who the nest belongs to. It's Bigfoot." And up on the ridge, you see this, you see this creature walking the ridge line, and it seems to be quite upset. And I've paused that video just about every frame, and you could see the arms hanging past the knees and trees in the background, and you're like, whatever that was is huge. And I do believe that is an authentic video of a Bigfoot creature. And there's quite a few. I mean, I have about 5 or 6 that I really like, that I think are worth taking a look at. But still, none of them, come close to that Patterson-Gimlin footage. So pretty incredible.
Which I think one of the reasons too that it stands the test of time is like, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation where if it's too good, then it's like, oh, well, it's Photoshop or it's editing. And so I think that's what's so great about like those, our sort of analog technology, the old evidence. To me, it just seems, I don't know, and maybe it's sort of a weird sort of romanticized idea of looking into the past as like, oh, well, it's old, so it must be real.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there were charlatans and hucksters back then, but like there is something that just feels a little more sort of credulous about those old,
For sure, man.
examples.
It's like, I hate it when someone says, well, it looks like someone like in an ape suit. I'm like, dude, do you remember Planet of the Apes, man? This is like, high budget Charlton Heston movie we're talking about here.
Yeah,
And
those
you're
guys
telling
that
me-
made the Planet of the Apes costume said that's better than anything we could do.
Exactly.
Yep.
And
exactly.
the guy who said that it was a gorilla suit was the gorilla suit maker. His name was Philip Morris, and his gorilla suits. I'll send you guys a picture here real quick, but they're really quite they're really laughable. And you guys remember that movie Trading Places, that the gorilla in that movie?
Which looked pretty great, actually.
Yeah, and then there's like a faker Halloween costume gorilla.
Right.
That's the old Philip Morris costume, and that's what it would have looked like back then. I just texted you guys a picture of the old Philip Morris gorilla costume, and the guy who claimed to be Patty Bob Hieronymus standing next to it, who, soaking wet is about 140 pounds, and
That dude sucks.
would not fill out that suit. But to your point, that's a great point, because I think a lot of people don't realize too that there was no sort of photo effects or computer generated effects of like falsifying a video like that. That film was deemed to be authentic and not messed with. And I think a lot of Bigfooters would probably agree that no picture or no amount of video will ever prove conclusively, because we've already seen incredible videos, and we've already seen incredible photographs. And so they've come to the conclusion that it won't be a video or a photograph that proves the existence of this creature, unfortunately. So you could take something incredible and people would still call it fake.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing for Bigfoot, if it does exist, is that I think that it would be sort of one of those like King Kong capture display kind of sad moments would be the only thing that people would, potentially believe in that, and that just sucks,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a whole other part of the equation, right? Is what do you do if you do sort of quote unquote capture one of these things, whether it's via tranquilization or death by bullet, or roadkill, what do you do with it afterwards, if you did capture one alive? I mean, so I think a lot of people don't even get to that part of the question.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, even Patterson, I think, said in his later years, because he went through so much sort of ridicule, he said, I wish I would have shot the damn thing.
Yeah, that's right. On his deathbed, he said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of speaks to what both of these guys experienced after the fact. I mean, their lives completely were upended, and not for the best. You know, they didn't make a lot of money on this film. In fact, they received a lot of ridicule, even death threats, and their lives really changed for the worse. You know, people have really sort of come around to Bob Gimlin, who's still alive today. And it's nice he gets to sort of have his moment in the sun, which is great, because I know Bob and I've spoken with him a few times. And man, there isn't a more stellar character. I mean, you know, his life story is incredible. He used to be a bodyguard, and he was a sailor, and he's just an excellent horseman, and you know,
like a boxer.
Yeah, he was a boxer in the Navy. That's right. And I think I think he was like a bodyguard for like Barbara Mandrell, and but he just has these incredible life that he's lived. And unfortunately, Patterson died at the young age of 39 of Hodgkin's lymphoma. So,
dang.
Right when this thing was at its prime controversy, you know, he passed away. So, you know,
which was only like 10 years later or something.
Yeah,
it was in the 70s.
Yeah. So he, you know, you don't realize he probably didn't think that film would outlast just about everything. But, you know, it's the second most seen film in the world, right after the Zapruder film of JFK's assassination.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, there's not a person you can walk by on the street who, you know, if you ask, hey, Joe, you ever see Bigfoot? Oh, that thing walking across I've seen that, you know, or seen a picture of it.
Truly probably the first viral video, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. You brought up Bob Hieronymus earlier. Tell us a little bit about this character, because I cannot stand this guy.
Well, he's just one of three people who claim to be the man in the suit, and right away, you know, they all three can't be telling the truth. But he's a gentleman who claimed to have never been paid, but supposed to be paid by the boys to be this guy in the suit walking up the sandbar or whatever.
Right.
And you know, I think he gets a lot of attention because there was a video of him in his later years when he's much fatter and much older, like imitating Patty's walk, you know. And it's easy to do that after the fact, and he's sort of walking, and people are like, "That's it, that's the walk. That must be him in the suit," you know. But I always like to point out, and that's why I sent you that picture. In 1967, Bob Hieronymus was probably maybe 5'8", 140 pounds,
right.
And he just does not fill out that suit, and he's even told some interviewers, like, well, I wore football pads and, you know, shoulder pads, and I put sticks on my arms, and you're just going, and at this point it becomes almost like a clown circus, and so extremely laughable, especially because when you actually examine those foot casts, which is what Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum did, and which really sort of convinced him of their authenticity, but it just becomes laughable that it's you know, if you really look closely at that film, you can see the musculature in the calves and in the thighs and in just that neck. That creature has like this bull's neck, and it's just like, you know, it's going to be individual to each person. And for me, it's always, I really trust my gut, right? And I always just go with what my gut's telling me. And when I see that film, I feel like I'm looking at something that's not supposed to exist.
Same.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, just pretty incredible stuff.
Well, Bryce, if we were able to interview Einstein, the last thing I would talk about would be the theory of relativity. I would want to talk about spooky action at a distance.
Oh, yeah.
So having you here, let's get into the weird part of the Bigfoot phenomenon. Let's get into like the Glimmerman cases and you know, the kind of weird sort of cloaking aspects.
I love that stuff.
I think it was season 2 of Expedition Bigfoot. There's a scene where Dr. Mayer is, you know, she's filming, and I think it's with the, you know, the heat FLIR camera, I think.
Yeah.
And you see, you know, this sort of standing upright figure, I guess, if you would, and it all of a sudden the legs kind of start disappearing, and it's like the light or the heat signature starts kind of like
fading away,
closing in on itself.
Yeah.
And it turns into like a little orb, and then moves on.
So fucking strange, but yet so cool, right? I mean, it's so metal. I mean,
it's amazing.
It's amazing.
Bigfoot goes back into his alternate dimension.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't give any of this stuff too much weight if I didn't hear people's actual accounts of that type of stuff happening and seeing those strange balls of light in the field myself. And, you know, for me, Bigfoot and its association with high strangeness came when I read the book Hunt for the Skinwalker by George Knapp and Dr. Colm Kelleher.
Yep.
And that's sort of the book. Everybody kind of knows what Skinwalker Ranch is today. It's this, you know, they call it the paranormal Disneyland. It's this territory in northern Utah. But anyway, they wrote the book almost, 15 plus years ago. And it was a property at that time bought by Robert Bigelow, who owns SpaceX, and he's always been interested in the paranormal. Saw a UFO when he was a young boy. So once he started hearing about the paranormal activity that was happening on this ranch from the rancher and his family, I mean, they were literally driven off the land. He immediately bought it up and he set up a scientific team called NIDS, the National Institute of Discovery Sciences, and they rigged up the whole property with cameras and deer stands, and they were just going to run a scientific investigation of the paranormal experiences people were having on this property, and it eluded them every time. One of the researchers on there, I think his name is Eric Davis, who's kind of steeped in UFO controversy today, but he said, you know, he called it a precognitive sentience. In other words, if they were planning on setting up a camera trap in this area, the phenomenon would know about it, and it would trigger it before they could even get there or after the fact. It's an incredible book. I highly recommend it. But anyway, so to get back to Bigfoot and high strangeness, they were doing a nighttime investigation, and a few of the scientists were in the deer stand, and they're just they got the idea to turn on their night vision camera recorders, and they on this pathway off in the distance, and they turn it on, and they see sort of this, for lack of a better word, a portal opening up. It's a ball of light that just starts opening and stretching, and what they see next is something with its hands grab the edge of that portal, and with its big foot come walking out of that portal. And
I love it.
And there's a picture of it. I'll send it to you guys. And it looks like a damn Bigfoot creature stepping out of the portal. And then they say it walked off into the woods. And for me, and when I saw that picture, I'm going to find it right now, I was like, oh, okay, so Bigfoot comes out of portals. That makes sense.
Right.
Right. Holy cow.
You know,
man.
I think of people, look, there's a few different camps, right? A lot of people, they don't have time for that, as they say. But just because some evidence or some stories or some testimony doesn't fit in their little box of what they think that this creature is, just an unconfirmed flesh and blood North American wood ape, and they don't want to hear about UFOs, and they don't want to hear about balls of light and cloaking. And I'm saying, well, I do. Let me discern. Let me discern myself whether this is in context to the Bigfoot phenomenon or not. Because if we're ever going to get to the bottom of this thing, I mean, we have to know everything about what we're looking at, you know? Hold on, I'm going to copy this right now and send it to you guys. I love this picture. And they used to have a website for Skinwalker Ranch where they kind of displayed all their evidence, and that website has since been taken down. But this is where I got the picture called "Portal Opening with Something Emerging," and it's one of my favorite photos. I'm going to share it with you now. I don't think you could find it anymore. Thank God it's still on my phone.
Well, and I think Bigelow has kind of since been, I mean, it's, you know, since then it's been bought by a new guy and a new sort of
Brandon
crew
Fugala, a real estate magnate of Utah too, who's also very interested in the paranormal. So I think they've passed the baton nicely, and since then they have that new show on the Skinwalker Ranch show, where they're with money comes high-tech tools and comes investigative power, and so they're looking into the phenomenon, and that's what I kind of love about even something like Expedition Bigfoot, is we're bringing to bear resources to look into this phenomenon, you know?
I mean, dude, like that's one of my favorite things about that show too, is it's not just kind of like, hey, we've got some cameras and we're following some folks in the woods, you know, who are out squatching or whatever. Yeah. This is like, you've got this high-tech data that you're using, this algorithm to determine like, you know, where the highest probability of some sort of interaction or whatever based on all this stuff. And like the LiDAR stuff, I mean, it's just, man, in terms of just being an audience member watching this unfold, it's super cool.
Well, and it works too, because I got to tell you, I mean, the shit we've experienced is, I think, unparalleled in Bigfoot research. I mean, other than like, you know, video recording one of these creatures out in the open clearing in daylight hours, I mean, footprints, vocalizations, hair.
Oh, man.
I mean, we had that, you know, there was a tree structure in Kentucky where Dr. Mayer took an eDNA sample, which stands for environmental DNA. You could basically just take a little soil sample, and that'll tell you every bioorganism that's ever existed in that plot of land. And what came back from the lab was, and it's a very credible lab, was indicators of chimp DNA, which is nobody's ever found anything like that. And, you know, for those who don't know, there's no other animal on this planet that shares more closely our DNA than that of the chimp. But it's just another puzzle piece to this mystery. But if we could sort of find evidence like that again and match those results or get more results like that, we could really put this Bigfoot phenomenon into another chapter of scientific peer-reviewed analysis. And so that's why it's so great having someone like, you know, Dr. Maria Mayer on the show, because she's a fucking primatologist, Fulbright scholar. She has co-discovered the world's smallest primate. So she's not a TV personality. I mean, this is somebody who's really, she's a scientist who's looking into this phenomenon because obviously she believes there's something to it, you know, or that it's worth looking into would probably be a better way to say it.
Right, which like, to me, it's interesting that, you know, I mean, frankly, she's kind of like putting it on the line a little
100%.
bit, right? Within the scientific community, you know, it's always been one of those, cryptids in general, I guess, have always been one of those subjects that kind of, in a way, could potentially quote unquote discredit.
Oh, you 100%. So she's 100%. You know, you're taking a risk by doing that.
Yeah.
Any academic, any scientist, and you know, they hold on to their careers so tightly because it's so hard to get academic recognition or peer-reviewed papers, and you know, God, just one false move and there goes your reputation as a scientist. As a reputation is all you have. So she's putting it all on the line. And so you got to give her
I mean,
credit
I
for
think
that.
it's not only badass, but it's also like, it kind of seems a little backwards that is what's putting it on the line. You know, it's like, that is the essence of science,
100%.
discovering new things, you know, experimenting with ideas. And so I think, you know, you could pass it along for us, man. We definitely applaud her for doing that.
I definitely will. I couldn't agree with you more.
She truly is like a true scientist.
Yeah, if there's a mystery, right? I mean, as a scientist, you're going to want to look into that, and even if you don't find the answers, you know, you're going to want to know what's going on, right? Isn't that the essence of being in this world, is to to familiarize yourself with its laws and with your surroundings? And there's still so much we don't know. I mean, we are still just sort of crawling around in the dark, in my humble opinion, as to what's really going on with the nature of reality.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
America's future can be determined by our dreams and our visions.
It was very intense, bright light.
For over 200 years, there have been reports of giant man-like creatures
From another dimension, another world, I don't know.
the most intriguing mystery on the North American continent.
Hey, this is Bryce Johnson from the Bigfoot Collectors Club, and you're listening to Tyler and Woody on That Would Be Rad, because that is rad. Did you guys get that picture? Did it come through?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Man.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of
That's
that?
awesome.
World, dude. It's crazy.
That's incredible.
Does that not look like a Bigfoot coming out of a portal?
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
man.
It's insane. Now, the strange
that's
thing
phenomenal.
about that, if I remember, is that it left 3-toed tracks.
Right, that's exactly right.
And what's interesting is you'll get a lot of that in some of these strange Bigfoot accounts. Sometimes they have 3 toes, sometimes 4, sometimes 6. So it's never just 5. And of course, most researchers will, well, then that's not Bigfoot. well, then what the fuck is that? Just some other hairy monster leaving tracks? What are we talking about here? How many
medium
of these
foot
are there? And why is there a southern Bigfoot and a Floridian Bigfoot and a Canadian Bigfoot and a Russian Bigfoot and a Chinese Bigfoot and an Indian Bigfoot? It's all over the world.
Exactly. I mean, that's something that fascinates the heck out of me, man, is just all around the world, different time periods, there's some sort of account or legends or stories that speak of a creature that's so similar. It's just, how could all these people from way back then, separated from, thousands of miles from each other, just make up the same story?
Yeah, I don't know. And either this creature does exist and offshoots itself into multiple subspecies at an unprecedented pace, or, as Carl Jung thought, that there's something to psychic manifestation of the collective unconscious. In other words, all societies, all people on this planet have a wild man of the woods archetype. The woods represented a dark and scary place. And when that happens, something manifests in your mind of what lures in those places. And is it us? And it gets very, I really love when deep psychology can meld with high strangeness, because I do believe there's, that the observer, in other words, the person who's witnessing, say, a Bigfoot, is part of the interaction that plays a part in what they're perceiving. In other words, you spoke about sort of quantum physics, but each person, the observed and the observee, is part of what's taking place at a molecular level. So, that observer who's perceiving Bigfoot is their mind is really a big part of the puzzle of what they're perceiving. If that makes any sense.
No, that's
for sure.
That's my favorite topic. It's that Jacques Vallée sort of, which I think that really ties in and speaks to like the, what once was a fairy abduction is now an alien gray. And it's like, it's the same sort of thing. So are we that component that's sort of providing the cultural change in the way it looks? And, I think it's all the same. I think it can tie into Bigfoot and really, all kind of paranormal. One thing I was curious about is listening to BCC probably 6 times every episode, all the way through. You would be the true believer. So that would sort of be my role on the show as well. And I'm really curious as to how did as someone who sort of can believe all sort of aspects, or not believe, but sort of...
it's a tainted word. I know what you mean.
You know what I
mean.
It's
you're open-minded to it.
Open-minded,
now,
perfect.
Now, having said that and help you define that now makes me sound like I'm not open-minded to it.
Well, no, Woody is too. Woody is too. But I'm like, I'm, even more of like less logic, more like, well, no, I mean, I think that sounds pretty good. But my question is, as somebody who is open-minded enough into sort of all things and the Jungian archetypes and the wild man thing, how did the eDNA sort of evidence, did it sort of shift your paradigm at all?
Yeah, my paradigm shifts quite often. I often struggle with the materialistic nature of some of the findings, even in the UFO culture. You can't discuss Roswell without discussing metal ships from Zeta Reticuli. Not something psychological, but something very real, tangible that you hold in your hand. You fold up the paper thin metal, and it pops back out into its original form.
Memory metal.
And the same goes with Bigfoot. I love to talk about orbs and cloaking Bigfoots, but at the same time, when you get an eDNA sample, I mean, that's tangible. It can be tested by science. It can be reviewed, and I haven't left out the flesh and blood theory that this that this creature really could just exist in a habitat and as a shy and extremely intelligent creature, just escape the eyes of human society. I don't have a problem with that. So yeah, my thoughts on it shift all the time, and I often, and that's what I love about it is I know that I'll never be able to pin it down. Same goes for ghosts, same goes for UFOs, same goes for Bigfoot. I'll never have the answers, and and that's okay as long as the questions keep coming to me. Then I stay satiated. And this is a great barometer for any of your listeners, whoever, and just in general, of anybody who claims to know exactly what's going on. Boom, full of shit. That your meter, your meter can just your meter can just go. Because then you just know that, okay, you don't know what the you're talking about. So anybody who claims they know what exactly is going on with Bigfoot or UFOs or alien grays or ghosts or the afterlife, you're full of shit, because in hundreds of years of people looking into this, people way more qualified than me, the best thing people have are their guesses, So my theories constantly change. And to kind of even talk on that, being a true believer, and I guess let me qualify that as, because I want to be a champion for the experiencer. I am an experiencer of strange phenomena. And so when people say they witness something or they experience something, I believe in that experience, right? And now whether that's asking me, do I believe in the Loch Ness monster that they experienced? I don't know, but I do believe that the experiencer experienced something out of the ordinary, something that can't be, explained away.
Right. Or to even sort of get even further into the weird territory, it's like, your skeptic's going to be like, oh, well, they just sort of imagined it, or it's just a mental thing. And it's like, well, right. I mean, does that take away credibility?
Right.
So maybe that is a component of it.
Totally. I don't mind a little skepticism. I'm quite a skeptic myself. It's those who are hell bent on debunking people's experiences that I really can't stomach.
It's funny too, because just like my wife as an example, she's not necessarily like a debunker, but she tends to kind of like in her mind approach things with, well, there's going to be a quote unquote logical explanation for X, Y, and Z. And for me, I just love I love stories. I love reading. I love hearing about experiences, and because and Tyler's the same way, I think, and that like our imagination is so vivid and
we're very sort of like romantics too.
Me too, all the way.
Like, I love to hear somebody describe their experience, because I can visualize it. I can hear myself I can feel that emotion and that fear, or and just the quest to just learn more about all these different things is just really what I love that about all of these different things, whether it's, someone witnessing something in the sky, or, somebody being out in the woods with their scout troop and seeing, what appears to be Bigfoot on a ledge or whatever. I mean, there's just so much of these things that happen that it's just so fascinating to me, man. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, what's weird to me is like just the and I hate that, like, I feel like the word skeptic is it's just very like skewed in a way now. It's like saying you're a skeptic, it's almost like you have these like professional skeptics who it's like it's their job just to shoot down everything.
Yeah.
And it's like my thing is sort of, your skeptic will come out and say, oh, well, like the aerial UFO thing in, where was it, Australia or South Africa? I can't remember. But the aerial
phenomenon in South Africa.
Yeah. It's like, how is it that it easily flows out of your mouth to say, oh, it's just a mass hallucination?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because here's the thing with most skeptics is they've made up their mind.
Exactly.
They've made up their mind that this can't exist, it doesn't exist. And so therefore, on that basis alone, these people must be hallucinating or making it up, and there's no other option. There's no room for something anomalous could have happened. And John Keel, who was a famed Fortean investigator, one of the one of the OGs of paranormal.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite quotes is "Belief is the enemy," and so
Yeah.
never believe in anything. So it's funny. I am sort of a true believer, but I don't know what I believe, and nothing's going to ever pin down my beliefs because I want to stay open to everything. I don't want to be locked in a mindset of, I know that this is what's going on, so therefore, that person's full of shit,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny, and you can really see it when people, you know when somebody's mind's made up when you're talking to them. You're like, there's no point in me wasting my breath. I'm not going to get through here. And so, that's okay. People can have their mind made up. But let me tell you something. The world becomes a lot more magical when you let
100%.
in Bigfoot.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I love it.
I mean, that might be the quote of the year right there.
Yeah, I think it is. That was strong.
Okay, let me ask you this, man, because this is something I haven't heard yet on your show that I'm kind of dying to know. I think your kids might be a little bit older than ours, but I want to get my kids into, and slowly kind of have, by taking them to this Bigfoot museum that's kind of local to us. I want to get them into Bigfoot, but without just scaring them to the point where they don't want to go camping.
Right.
So, did you approach that in a unique way, or were you just kind of like, well, I mean, I saw Bloodsport when I was 5, so they'll be fine.
Right.
How did you approach that with your kids?
Well, I just let them break my balls about it all day long, especially my daughter. I'm really kind of not allowed to say the word Bigfoot around my house without getting a lot of eye rolls. And it's water off the back. It doesn't bother me too much, but I think passion is going to rub off on your children regardless. So, I'm easy to joke about the subject, and I always kind of play it off. Well, I don't know. There's something going on out there, and they like that. But when they see me really sort of get passionate about somebody's eyewitness account or something I read, you see a mechanism working in the back of their mind that, whoa, my dad's taking this seriously. I wonder what this is about,
Yeah, it's like a genuine reaction.
Yeah, and so I think passion rubs off, and God, as a small boy, as a small girl, I mean, you're open to the world of the imagination. You're open.
Yeah.
You're open. Not that this stuff is imaginative, but you're open to the idea that the world is a vast place, and God, anything can lurk around the corner, and if you can hold on to that throughout your life, then man, I don't know, it becomes richer, So I think for my son, he's interested in it. My daughter, she rolls her eyes a lot, and so does my wife. She really rolls her eyes. But then when Expedition Bigfoot comes on, I kind of force them to sit down, and I try and shut up as much as possible. And if I get at an end of an episode, I'm pretty happy.
Yeah,
you
right.
know what
Yeah,
I
then
mean?
you win.
And I'm like,
That's
gotcha.
awesome.
You know what I mean?
Victory.
So I'll take that,
Yeah, my oldest daughter, Amelia, she's 6, and she's always been kind of artsy like me, and she's, very imaginative, and, she's got into cryptids these last couple years, but it's funny because it's very she's really into it, and then the sun goes down and it's time for bed, and it's like, well, you've been talking about Mothman all day, and all of a sudden it's like, Dad, I don't want to talk about Mothman anymore, because it's suddenly it's scary, when the lights are off. But I just continue to try to teach her that, and I think it's important for parents to be there's something really great in saying, I don't know what it is, I don't know, and I think for your kids to see that oh well, my parents who are everything is set and they got everything together and they're taking care of me. I think it's good that they see sometimes that us as adults are I don't know, and it's okay.
Yeah,
I
couldn't agree with that more. God, just hearing an adult say, I don't have the answers is so refreshing. Right. We so often pretend to know everything that's going on in the world. And, I guess one of the reasons why I love all this stuff under the umbrella of high strangeness is because, I've always been fascinated with sort of Plato's 3 great questions, who am I? Why am I here? Where are we going? Right. I think all this stuff, Bigfoot included, can really be part of that answer. I think it's an integral part of that answer as to who we are, the nature of our reality, where we're going, and just what the fuck is going on, you know? So I mean, there's a mystery at play. There's a mystery at play on this planet right now, and most people choose to ignore it, you know, not me.
Well, I mean, and it's, you know, it's like the Arthur C. Clarke. I think it's Arthur C. Clarke. I get this wrong every time, but it's like magic is just science.
Yeah.
We don't yet
Any
understand.
technological and indistinguishable from, oh God, I'm slaughtering that. But yes, any I'm going to paraphrase, any misunderstood technology it comes off as magic.
Right. It's, you know, there's weird stuff out there, and it's okay to say, well, I believe what I saw. I believe like the vibe of it. I believe that there is like a genuineness about this thing, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, well, and that speaks to your wife's point of there's got to be a logical explanation for it. And you know what? She's probably right. I still believe that we're at the infancy of our sciences. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I still, there's so much we don't know, you know, and I think people often forget that they think science has it all locked up and in a bag, and it's just not true. Right. You know what I mean? There's so much that we just can't explain for, and therein lies the key to what's taking place, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I don't know how much time you have.
I've got plenty of time, man. I'm not going. Okay, I'm really enjoying the conversation. So.
All right.
Whatever else you got, we can cover.
Because one thing we haven't brought up yet is Willow Creek. Now, for our listeners who haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend it. I will say I was kind of surprised. I didn't know this kind of going in, but you see Bryce's buns for a second. So, I was like, whoa, okay, whoops, the daisies. I didn't plan on that, but all right.
So Bobcat Goldthwait, the director, I'll get right back to what you were saying, just to touch on my buns for a second. He was like, okay, so then this next scene, you're gonna be, I want you to jump in the creek. And it's like, yeah, okay, great. And he's like, maybe you want to do it, since it's a creek and you're out here alone, I mean, maybe you would do it naked. I don't know. And I was like, wait, are you asking me to do it naked? And he's like, well, I'm just saying, I mean, if it were me doing it, I would. And I was like, oh, well, of course I'll do it then. You know what I mean? Challenge accepted, man. So
yeah.
But he let me.
Dude, it's just hilarious, man. But one thing that I loved about the movie, first off, is it just feels so real.
Yeah, it does.
For me to say it's my favorite, like, sort of Bigfoot themed movie or whatever isn't really giving you a ton of credit, because really it's maybe the only Bigfoot kind of movie that I've seen.
Well, you're second to Harry and the Hendersons for me.
Yeah, right, true. But just in general, I just thought, man, it is amazing. Your acting is incredible.
It is.
Just the way that it was done. One thing that I wondered since, though, is like, what was it like working with Bobcat? I mean, because being a kid of the 80s, I only know him. My sort of exactly, the voice. Yeah. Right? Does he kind of kick into it every now and then, or is he just more straight laced?
No, and I think I had the gut instinct early on to never ask him to do the voice or about the voice, because when I first met him, it was an audition for his movie Sleeping Dogs Lie, and he was directing Jimmy Kimmel Live at the time, so it was in the basement of the El Capitan Theater where they filmed that not the Tonight Show, Jimmy Kimmel Live or whatever. But and my first impression of him was, oh my God, here's a soft-spoken, sensitive, highly intelligent man, Right. And after that movie, we formed just a bond immediately, and I've done 4 films with him since, and I love the guy. Wow. And he's so intelligent about the story he wants to tell, and filming Willow Creek is one of the highlights of my career, because it was just such a collaborative process. So I had done a movie before with him. I was in Canada with my wife, where she's from, in Vancouver. And I get a call that summer out of the blue saying, and as we've discussed, I already had an interest in the paranormal. He said, I'm thinking about doing a found footage Bigfoot movie. I wanted to know what you think. I was like, dude,
say no more.
You just found your man, And that was it, man. I was off and running. And you know, what little I had known about Bigfoot at that time, I knew I was interested. I dove in head first into the research, and so a lot of what I say in that film is really just me, you know, talking about Bigfoot and the stuff I had researched and learned. And I mean, it really was only like, I found it the other day, it was like a 16 or 15 page treatment or script. So, you know, most of that is just improv and
pretty loose.
Yeah, it's very loose. But Bob knew how he wanted it to end, and he knew the beats that he wanted to construct. And he knew at some point he wanted to experiment by creating a very long scene in a tent. And and that becomes a lot of people's favorite scene. And it was such a risk because he was like, I'm just going to set the camera up in the tent. It'll just be you two. And you're just going to hear sounds in the forest, and then we'll just go with that. We're just going to try it. And the scene ends up by being something almost like 19 minutes, which is just unheard of. I mean, it's almost a fourth of the film, you know. And but man, people love that scene. I think just because
I'm one of them.
We're just experiencing, you know, we're so in it. Me and Alexi, the actress who plays my girlfriend, that we don't know what's going to happen, and we're hearing sounds off in the woods and stuff being thrown at our tent. And for me, this was very real because we actually filmed this in a place called Louse Camp, that very tent scene, which is where Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin camped out every night and tied up their horses while they trekked into Bluff Creek and areas around that to look for Bigfoot tracks. So we were in it, man. We were right there. So it was not hard for me to imagine, you know, what that must be like or experience.
Did you get a chance to kind of go and do your best to visit the exact area where the footage was?
Well, we had a few locals who were willing to take us to the Bluff Creek site, the actual site, and since then. There's a couple guys around that area who have started something called the Bluff Creek Project, and they've actually located the exact film site. And I
was going to ask, and
they've
do they know where the exact location
the exact spot, and they've qualified it and they've validated it, and so they've done some great work on that. But yeah, they were going to take us down there. We never did actually go to the film site because it's just so treacherous, and it's such a hike to get in there. And we didn't really need to, right? I mean, for my character, he's like, I want to go to the film site, but then shit starts happening. So, so we didn't, you know, to make sense of it, we didn't even really need to get to that actual spot, but we were less than a mile away from it, you know, so.
Wow.
Man.
That's amazing.
Now, some of the folks that you guys kind of talk to and stuff in the film, they're legit locals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen Stroyford of Bigfoot Books. I mean, he's an icon there. He's been in that area, and he's your local legendary Bigfoot expert. And there was a lot of witnesses that are local to the area. I love, one of my favorite is there was an old lady who she's like the head of tourism of Willow Creek, and it's a little booth. It's just a tiny little booth, and and Bob's like, ask her if she believes in Bigfoot. I'm like, okay, you know. And I'm like, so do you believe in Bigfoot? She's like, oh, no, you know.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm like, of course, how could you say that? You're the head of tourism of Willow Creek, which is a town built on Bigfoot. But she did.
Did you guys run into anybody that was like kind of not hostile necessarily, but just kind of like, oh boy, here we go?
Well, I think people were very leery of Bobcat Goldthwait coming in and making a Bigfoot movie, so he really had to set everybody's tensions at ease right away, saying, I'm not here to make fun. I'm not here to poke fun at people who believe in Bigfoot or Bigfoot. Bobcat basically said, I'm one of you. I'm a weirdo, you know? Right. And so I'm making a story about my fascination with this creature ever since I was a boy. And I think once people met him and you know, got to sort of hear what their take was, because I believe that God, was it Bob Saget was in that neck of the woods like just like a few months prior, like doing his shtick on a Bigfoot something.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so people were very leery of how Bobcat was going to approach this film. But I think, much to their surprise, once they saw it, it became a Bigfoot film that people could be proud of. Because I've seen a lot of Bigfoot films as we cover them on Bigfoot Collectors Club Patreon.
Right? Yeah.
And there's a lot of really shitty ones out there. So,
a lot of bad ones.
So to be able to be a part of a film that I think people can kind of hold as close to their own in this weird, strange little community, it's something I'm very proud of. And I love when
you should be,
people
man.
respond to that film.
It's amazing. And what's cool too is it's like, even if someone isn't or it doesn't have any interest in Bigfoot, the movie itself, like, take that aspect out of it, really, and the movie itself still holds. Like,
oh well, thank you so much. I couldn't agree more. I've seen it maybe like 10 or plus times, and I still enjoy watching it.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler always pauses it at the moment.
Well, it's my wife. She pauses actually at the moment.
Oh my God, I'm blushing.
Man. Well, I mean, I have like a series of questions that kind of like not necessarily a rapid fire, but sort of just like, that has to do with more of the other stuff that we talk about on our podcast.
Sure.
But before I do that, is there anything else you want to give us about any of those sort of Bigfoot topics?
No, I think we've covered a lot of it. Yeah, I'll just say, as an early plug, we're in the midst of filming season 3 of Expedition Bigfoot. I think fans are going to be really excited as to some of the stuff we're finding. And man, I know I was when we found it. So,
and I mean, I think this goes without saying, but if you happen to triangulate some stuff and, you come to Georgia.
Oh, God. Wouldn't that be incredible?
You better give us a call.
I would love to interview you fellas, man.
Yeah, that would be sick.
Shoot BB guns in the backyard.
Mm-hmm. If you do, the old, the Bigfoot Sasquatch Museum is right up the road from us. So
Yeah,
it's really cool, too. It's actually, man, it's really, really cool.
I hope one day to make your acquaintances out that way.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so the first one I've got for you is, what is your favorite 80s horror movie?
Oh my God. It's a tough one.
No, I know that's tough, because if you asked me that same question, I'd be like, well, man, dude, I don't.
I mean, is Critters a horror movie?
Yeah.
That has a special place in my heart.
Me too, man.
Oh, that's awesome.
Of all the planets in the galaxy, they chose ours.
Dad's all torn up and Mom's got like a harpoon sticking in her neck, and they're getting bigger.
Critters. They bite.
I mean, it's PG-13, and Critters 2 is also PG-13, but you see boobs.
Right. It's got to have boobs, man. I mean, if it's going to be one of my favorite. Oh, my God. Yeah, I'll go with Critters, man. I don't know why. I love that, that little
awesome.
movie.
I love it, man. All right, so everybody has that kind of like guilty pleasure song that, either it was just like their song with their girlfriend back in the 80s or early 90s, or I'll give you an example. So for me, it was Everything I Do It For You by Brian.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
And it was from the soundtrack of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and I gave a tape to this girl. It was going to be a mixtape, but I decided, why not just put that song back to back, both sides, A and B? So if you're listening to Robin Orlansky, this one's for you. But
it's on loop,
what
girl.
was you know what I mean? If she wasn't picking up the vibe, I don't know what was going on.
Oh, that's so funny.
But do you have a song like that?
Oh, man. It's funny. Speaking of girls and our song, I remember, I don't have a guilty pleasure song, but I do remember, like, Peter Gabriel's In Your Eyes. Like, my girlfriend in high school at the time, we didn't last very long, but we were both like, yeah, this is our song. And when it comes on, we're just going to look into each other's eyes. And
then I'm going to hold a boombox above my head.
It's so just like, what? Oh, my God.
So cheesy,
such a
man.
deep song for a couple, deep 15-year-olds.
Oh, very good.
Now, this is going to be maybe the toughest question on the list, but that is, do you have a favorite cryptid? Oh, man. Aside from Bigfoot, Bigfoot's my favorite cryptid. There's no doubt about it. There's nothing more close to, I think, of, encapsulating all the mysteries than old Biggie. He seems to intersect with everything, and I kind of love that. But then Mothman comes in right at a close second, man. That's a pretty strange phenomenon as well.
Yeah, I've actually never thought about that until you said that, but he does cover such a wide range of like flesh and blood.
Oh yeah,
weird sort of,
Yeah, I mean, and just the amount of sightings and evidence is overwhelming. I mean, out of all the mysterious, maybe UFOs right up there too as well. But I mean, God, it never stops, and it's always continuous.
It's amazing. All right, Nintendo or Sega?
Oh, Nintendo all the way.
Boom.
Yeah, same.
Nike or Reebok?
Oh, that's a good question. Man, I guess probably Nike. Even though I do recall a dope pair of Reeboks I had.
I mean, for me it was pumps, Nike until the pumps. That's what I was going to say.
Right? Yeah, those pumps were sweet, man. Added like a half inch to my vertical.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah,
at least.
Oh man, did you ever have like the kid in your class that like pumped it up too much and blew it out?
Oh yeah, of course.
That's the best.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys remember the like they were like these toe walking shoes? So it was like a normal like high top. That's the word I'm looking for.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And on the front of it, where the front part of your foot is, it had this like 4-inch platform, and so you would just walk on your toes, and it was to increase your vertical. And I remember this kid in our
a calf builder.
Yeah, it was like a calf builder shoe.
Oh my God, dude!
This kid at our school, his name was Marty. He would walk around, and I would be like, "What the fuck are those things, dude?" But then, like by the end of the year, this kid was dunking, and I was like,
really?
"Oh yeah, I'll shut the fuck up. Those shoes are working for you." I stand corrected.
Dude, I have not thought of those. I mean, at first I forgot. I didn't even know what you were talking about. And then I finally, it hit me. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude. Yes, I remember those. That's amazing.
That is, yeah.
Starter jacket or one of those Baja hoodies?
Oh, man. For me, it was a San Francisco 49ers starter jacket. And I
out of Michigan.
Yes, for me, it was Atlanta Braves.
Oh, yeah. I felt so cool and so dangerous, too. I was like,
oh, yeah.
You could get jacked for that jacket. Yeah, let them come.
Yeah, man.
Bring it on. Come get this jacket.
But I got a pistol in this jacket.
Yeah, man.
Oh, man.
Skateboarding or rollerblading?
Skateboarding, man. My son's a skateboard, and I still have a longboard, so I like cruising the streets, man. Yeah, skateboarding all the way.
Yeah.
Were you more of like a Vans or like Airwalks kind of skater dude, or maybe even Converse?
No, yeah. Well, I definitely went through a Converse All-Stars period because there was a time you could go create your own Converse on their website, and so I loved creating the inseam and then putting my name on the heel, Riz, and I loved that. But they were too narrow, so I have a wide foot. I can't wear Converse too comfortably, but I do enjoy good Vans, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And those Converse, as cool as they are and classic, boy, they are flat as hell. There is no support.
There's no support there, man. So
not at all.
As I'm getting well into my 40s, I'm like, maybe a little support's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I know. It's like, man, my back's hurting. Well, you should stop wearing those cons, man. Now, this might get a little controversial here. Vanilla Ice or MC Hammer?
Oh, dude, let me tell you, that's not controversial at all. In high school, they used to call me Vanilla Bryce.
Yo, VIP. Let's kick it.
Because let me tell you something, I memorized every one of those dance moves from that video. And when I was a teenager, I used to listen to BBD in my room and just dance and practice dancing and dancing. Dude. I loved dancing. And so when I got into high school and that first dance came up, Vanilla Bryce did his thing, man, and everybody got around in a circle around me, and it was my little moment, my time to shine, and all that hard practicing in my room really paid off.
I mean, for sure. I mean, I'll never listen to, or I'll never hear "Go Ninja, Go Ninja, Go" without thinking of you doing the dance, man. That's amazing.
Well, see, I was on the other side because when I was in 5th grade, my mom rented me a tux, and I had a whole dance routine to Too Legit to Quit.
Oh, yeah.
And because I was so excited, I burned through that routine and still had the last half of the song. So it was like, just do it again.
Oh, that's so good. Oh my God.
So embarrassing.
Crazy.
And then last, one thing that Ty and I have gotten into this year, have you ever played Dungeons and Dragons?
Come on. I never did a true blue campaign. I had a book or two on it, but I do recall playing Ninjas and Spies, which was an RPG game, and I kind of dug that. But my son's getting into Dungeons and Dragons today, and I'm helping support that. And so, I love it. I just that whole world creation thing. I mean, God, so enriching for the imagination, you know.
It really is, man. And so obviously there's always an open invitation if you ever want to hop into like a little
you or your son, you and your son, bring them on.
That'd be great. Hell yeah. We got character sheets all written up and ready to go, man.
Dude, it's amazing, man. And there's so many like cool new resources available, like D&D Beyond. You can create it online, dude, and roll the dice from right there, and it does everything for you.
It's an intimidating world, man. Oh my God. Like trying to like uncover it for my son, I'm like, wow, there's a lot to look into. But he's starting to gather some friends who have mutual interest in that, and so I think we're going to help facilitate a D&D night here soon.
Yes,
nice.
Dude, I love it, man. I know this is straight up continuation of just fanboying out here, but like, man, no joke, it just means the absolute world to us that you took the time to come on our show, man. I mean, you're super busy. You got incredible things going on, and thank you so much. This has just been it's just been amazing.
Oh well, I send that right back your way. I love what you guys are doing. I'm a fan of your stuff, and it's been my honor. I had a really great time talking to you guys.
Checks in the mail.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
Bryce, when you're not hanging out with us on our podcast, where's a good place for people to find you?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, you can catch me on mostly Instagram and Twitter. I'm on Twitter, I'm at Bryce O. Johnson, and on Instagram at Mr. Bryce Johnson. And that's it. Oh, and I also invented and created an adult party game called Dirty Picture Cover Up, or DPCU for short. It's like if Cards Against Humanity and Pictionary had a dirty baby, then you would get DPCU. And you can find that or order one of those at thedpcugame.com. And it really is a blast to play. So if you like adult party games, check that out.
Love it.
Awesome, man. Well, again, dude, thank you so much, man.
Hey, man, my pleasure. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Absolutely. Well, we'll have to have you back too, man. Well, folks, man, I don't even know where to begin, where to but if this is any indicator of how much bigger, better, stronger, faster season 2 is going to be, I think we're off to a hell of a good start.
That's the way it goes. Clouds in a time where I just needed some sunshine. You were already dead for became a ghost. You always said our future would be a parade of flowers, but now all that's left is a single rose. That's the way it goes.
Oh, dude, I got Hackers in the Mail on VHS, and I gotta tell you, dude, I like even you just sending that that little like weird teaser trailer thing for that scary movie.
Oh yeah,
I'm a little
looks weird, doesn't it?
Scary movie out, bro. Understand?
Yeah. I kind of am too.
I mean,
I didn't even.
Oof. You didn't even watch them, bro.
No, I did.
Well, you watched a couple.
I did watch the new one.
Yeah, go, dude. Please watch part 4.
Oh, that's what I keep.
That's really
no. I did. I looked it up because you said that they were on HBO Max, and it's not on there.
Yeah, I think they took it off. I think they're on Stars now. Do you have Stars?
We used to, but we finally just cut the cord.